Doug Mientkiewicz was as gritty as they come. Heck, he didn't even need batting gloves. A Florida State grad, he went on to play 12 seasons in Major League Baseball. He made his debut with the Minnesota Twins on September 18, 1998, and just 2 years later he represented Team USA in the Summer Olympics Down Under, helping his squad win the gold with a .414 average and 2 home runs. In addition to having the 7th most difficult name to spell in Major League history, Mientkiewicz also ranked 7th all-time in fielding percentage among first basemen. Simply put, he didn't make a lot of errors. His skills at first reached a high in 2001, his breakout year. That season, he took home a Gold Glove award and even garnered MVP consideration while batting .306. The next season, Mientkiewicz helped lead the Twins to their first playoff berth since 1991, the year they won it all. History wouldn't repeat itself in '02, but the Twins would take the division series from the Moneyball Oakland Athletics that year. Mientkiewicz had another great year in 2003, but in the middle of '04, he'd leave Minnesota, the place he'd call home for 6.5 seasons. That fall, history would literally land in the palm of his hand while playing for his next team, the Boston Red Sox. After coming back from a 3-0 deficit against the Yankees in the 2004 American League Championship Series, the Red Sox swept the St. Louis Cardinals to clinch their first World Series title in 86 years. And wouldn't you know it, Mientkiewicz made the last out. He became a journeyman over the next several seasons, playing for the Mets, the Royals, the Yankees, the Pirates, and the Dodgers, with his last Major League game coming in 2009. Since then, Mientkiewicz has mentored players who are currently in the big leagues, and he loves watching them thrive in the sport he played all those years ago. Now he's fielding some questions from me here on Touching Base. How you making out with the weather by you? Did you have to deal with any of those Canadian fire fumes last week?
No, thank God. We just have like tropical storms and hurricanes. That's all we have.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. We got crappy weather today, but yeah, we're down at the Jersey Shore. We're up from where you are. I think you're in Florida, right?
yep, I'm in
Yeah,
Florida. Yes, sir.
yeah. We're in
Yep.
the Northeast. We got crazy weather here at the Jersey Shore, but yeah, today it's one of those days where it's just kind of overcast and passing showers. So yeah, you take the good with the bad. It's the Jersey Shore, but
That's it.
yeah, man. So listen, hey, thanks so much for doing
Of
this, man.
course.
You were a lot of fun to watch play. But let's get to it right from the beginning. Talk to me about the early days. Who were your influences, and how did you kind of fall in love with baseball?
Oh man, pretty much my dad. I mean, my dad was, was a diehard Pete Rose fan, and it blossomed from there. We didn't. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. I was born there, I should say, and I just kind of fell in love with hockey. And when we moved to Florida, it was like not so much ice there, so we got to figure something else out. And my dad we never really had a favorite team or a favorite player, but he did everything that he tried to show me was through Pete Rose, and that was just one of those things. The way he played, always dirty, crouched over stance, and my dad always preached hard work, and he always preached, he had like mottos where 100 swings a day, you're only cheating yourself, and
Right.
hard work pays off, and you either got to be really smart or really tough in this world, and you're probably not going to be too smart, so you better figure it out. So he was kind of tough love, but I'm glad he did it the way he did it.
Yeah, mottos to live by. Absolutely. So I saw that you were when the time came, you were drafted once in '92. I think you opted to wait, and you got drafted again in '95. What was the reason for the wait?
It's funny. I was supposed to roommate with Shannon Stewart. He was the first rounder for the Blue Jays that year, and I was all set on signing with the Blue Jays. And then I asked them if I could play in Team Florida, which was an all-star team. It had Johnny Damon,
Yeah.
Mark Gilborn. It had some guys on there, and a couple guys from my high school. My high school coach was coaching, and I was just like, "Can I go play on this before I sign?" They're like, absolutely. And long story short, we had roommates, and my roommate was Jonathan Johnson, who ended up being the 7th or 9th pick with the Rangers in '95. He was going to Florida State. And he just kept telling me, like, we're going to be really good. And, you can always go to the Pro Bowl. It's not going to go anywhere. And after hearing that for like a week, it set in, was like, hey, all right. If, he kept plugging along and kept, hammering in my back of my head going, we'll win a national championship. And I know when I came home it was in Oklahoma. was in Stillwater, Oklahoma. When I came home from that, the Blue Jays were not happy. They said, I'm going to blackball your son. You're never going to play in the big leagues. And I'm like, look, my dad handled it better than I ever thought he would. He's like, look, I have one son. You guys deal with this every day. I don't deal with this. I do whatever my son wants, and he goes, even my dad told, I think it was Pat Gillick at the time, was just like, look, if it was up to me, he'd be going. He just signed last week. He's like, but I don't think it's the right move, but I'm going to stand behind whatever my son wants. And I ended up going to Florida State and ended up working out.
Yeah, I mean, what's best for you. And it's funny because you ended up being a lot of those guys. You were teammates with a lot of those guys. Mark Bellhorn, Johnny Damon. I think Shannon Stewart you crossed paths with on the Twins.
Yep. I mean, I always look back at my career going, man, what if I would have signed out of high school? And, like once I got to the big leagues, I was like, man, it'd been kind of nice to see if I could have made it at 20,
right.
And then I think back to my first year of professional baseball. I started 5 for 110. And I went 2 for 4 opening night with a homer, I think 5 RBIs in high A ball. And I remember thinking like, man, I'll be in Double A in 2 weeks. And then I went 3 for like 106 after that. And I try to think back, if I would have been 18 years old, going 5 for 110, I don't know if I was mature enough to get out of it. I wasn't mature enough to get out of it. I went through it at 20 or whatever it was, 21, whatever it was. And I just think back, like that was that hurdle. If I didn't have college and I didn't handle it well at all, you can ask my roommates. I think I drove them crazy. But like without being older, there's no way I could have handled that.
Right. That 3 years of maturity probably played a huge role in allowing you to overcome that hurdle.
It was maturity, but it was also like I needed college because I went from Westminster Christian where we won a national championship, and I didn't want to go be a number in the GCL, in the Gulf Coast League, in the Arizona League. I wanted to kind of I tasted what expectations felt like at Westminster. We expected to win every game, and we had pressure on us, if that's a word. I don't believe in it, but I understand it. And I went and I was like, you know what, going to Florida State, my goal, my end all dream of mine my whole life was playing in the College World Series. I thought the big leagues was so far-fetched for what I was capable of doing. So I just wanted to play in Omaha, and I felt like going to Florida State was an attainable goal for me. I know my dad, over the years we've joked about it, but he told me, he's like, you'll never play there. And I don't know if he said it to dangle the carrot or which he was very good at, and he did it in a subtle way. He did it out of love. He wasn't trying to be mean, but like when you hear that from your dad, you're like, all right, a-hole, like, all right, I'm gonna.
Yeah, you take it at face value, but it could have just been reverse psychology, and like you said, dangling the carrot. Yeah,
he did it countless times, and it worked. He knew who I was, and he knew what made me tick, and he knew that if he told me I couldn't do something, I was going to do everything in my power to prove him wrong.
Well, it worked. And then you ended up also not only making the majors, but a few years after your debut, you end up being on the 2000 Olympics team. How did that all come to be? How did you get selected, and what was the experience like?
I got selected because I was so bad as a rookie in 1999. I went from Double-A to the big leagues. I skipped Triple-A, and I was, to lack of a better term, I was awful. I mean, I was terrible. I was there all year. I remember going to the field every day hoping to be sent down, like begging to be sent down. And it just like, there was not a worse feeling in the world than knowing you're not a big leaguer and having to wear a big league uniform. It sounds different, and it sounds, when you hear so many people say, oh, I would give anything to be a major leaguer for one day. But when you feel like you haven't earned it and you haven't earned the right to stay, I felt like, how many great players that I've passed, or Triple-A guys or Double-A guys that never got a chance to play in the big leagues, and here I am, like, stealing service time. I was miserable, and so that year got me sent back to Triple-A for 2000, and I was having a really good year in Triple-A. One of the, like, arguably, regardless of level, was probably the best year I had. I started slow, but from, let's say, May 1st on, everything clicked. Power, doubles. I had a great offensive club. I mean, my club at times had Todd Walker, Butch Husky, Torrey Hunter came down for 6 weeks and hit 360 with 18 homers and 70 RBIs. Brian Buchanan missed a month and he had 30 and 100. AJ was on that team. Brzezinski. We had some dudes. I mean, we had Chad Allen. I hit 330 something, 339 or something. I finished third in the league, or third in the league, and like fourth on my team. Or second on my team. Like I couldn't even. Our John Barnes hit 400. It was crazy. We hit 330 something as a club, and it
Video
was a
game
really
team. Yeah.
Casey Blake was a utility guy for us. Casey Blake had a hard time finding playing time, and he ended up having a tremendous career in the big leagues. So we had some guys, and it just made baseball fun again. I had a great time, great guys. I enjoyed going to work every day. And then all of a sudden, the Olympics was kind of around, and I had a chance. I played in '94. I had a chance to try out for the '96 team. I just felt like after my high school debacle with the pro draft, there's no way I can just say, "Hey, I'm gonna pass up again and go back and try to." And like my mom was heartbroken. My mom was like, "All I wanted you to do is play in the Olympics." Right, and I'm like, right. "Mom," and I go, "Mom, I wasn't guaranteed a spot on the '96 team. And that '96 team was probably the best amateur baseball team ever assembled." The list of Travis Lee, Jock Jones, Chad Allen. There was a lot of guys. I don't think I make that team because Travis Lee was probably arguably the best first baseman, at that time coming out of college, and it was phenomenal. So, and long story short, but my mom, I know when I got a chance to go back and have a chance, I put my name out there. Thankfully, the Twins let me go. The coolest moment was getting able to tell my mom, like, "Hey, I know it's not Atlanta," which was '96.
Right, that was '96, sure.
I said, "It's not Atlanta. It's a little bit farther." I said, "But if I don't screw this up, we're going to Sydney." And she was ecstatic, and it was the best experience of my life. I mean, it brought so many things besides the gold medal and the homers and all this stuff. Tommy Lasorda, rest in peace, was so influential on me at the time, with confidence and I was so down in the dumps about never going back, like I'm not knowing if I'm a big leaguer. Right. He instilled so much confidence in me and spent a lot of quality time with me personally, not at the field, but one-on-one in the village and stuff. And for stuff that has not really ever been documented, but like there's nights we had talks where his voice and what he was saying and his wisdom was beyond anything any coach has ever talked to me. So he did a lot of things for me that he didn't have to do, and I'm forever grateful for that.
Yeah, and it probably resonated with you well, what he had to say.
Well, it just brought me belief. It brought me belief that I could play in the big leagues.
Absolutely. So, whatever happened in 2000, I mean, it went right for you for your major league career because the very next year, 2001, was essentially your breakout year. I mean, it was your first year as a full-time player. You batted .306. You got MVP votes. You won the Gold Glove Award. And I don't know if you know this, but you're seventh all-time in fielding percentage among first basemen. I believe, funnily enough, Casey Blake, who you mentioned before, is number one. And you were a great fielder. Did you focus a lot on fielding growing up, or was it something that you were just kind of naturally good at?
First base was never a position for me. I always caught or pitched or played third or whatever, and growing up played shortstop like everybody else did. And I just knew that when they moved me to first and the Twins moved me to first, I was like, actually Florida State did first because I had shoulder surgery my freshman year. But I just figured, and I got to Pro Bowl, I had to do things that separated me from the Delgados, Carlos Delgados, the Jason Giambis.
Yep.
The list goes on.
All of them.
I couldn't do what they do. I couldn't, and I just felt like, okay, they don't catch it as well as they hit it. I'm going to have to do something to separate myself from them. I'll never be a 30 home run guy. I'm just going to have to be a high on base guy, not strike out, be a tough out, play my rear end off on defense, take runs away, and just be a high average guy. And the teams that I played on, at times they wanted more power, and so did I, and it just didn't work out. But 2001 was I remember I was 400 in almost June, and everything that, like, the culmination of everything of the year before and the years leading up to it, just kind of. And the funny thing is, I was always a slow starter, and to do that out of the chute, I remember I was like 1 for 11 or something, 12 starting that year off. I'm going, oh no, here we go again. And Tom Kelly pulled me aside and said, "You're gonna play every day, so just." I remember, I'll never forget this. We were in Kansas City, and a fan fell out of the stands and like almost broke his neck. And they halted the game, and it was like a Sunday day game,
Right.
One of those seventh inning at bat that really doesn't matter. Yeah. But in my heart rate, it was that Game 7 of the World Series. And he walked out on deck and just goes, "You're going to play every day. So please take a deep breath, and I don't care what happens." And it was the first time TK's ever pulled me aside and said anything remotely positive to me, which I didn't earn yet. And I remember I hit a ground ball between first and second for a hit. And it was like the weight of the world went off my shoulders. Yeah, and we came home for a homestand to start that year, and I think I hit 2 or 3 homers, and the rest was history. And I remember that year, I remember telling myself, like, there's no way I'm getting a hit tonight. And I just feel it, and I'd throw out a 4-hit night, and I'd back it up with a 3-hit night. And it just never stopped. And I ran into an injury bug at the end of that year. I remember I was like 339 or something. I remember that because it was the highest I ever been that late in the year. And in September, and I was like, I got a shot. I got to push. And I ended up injuring my forearm, and we were in the pennant race for the first time. And I probably played when I shouldn't have, but winning meant more than my numbers. And my numbers suffered, but it still was the year I tried to chase the rest of my career. I never could quite do it.
Right. Well, when you played full time, I mean, you have a 271 career batting average, but I don't think that's a true testament to how good of a hitter you were, because when you played full time and push came to shove, your 3 full seasons, you batted 290. I mean, so you were doing something right.
I mean, I feel like, it's funny how numbers are kind of skewed. 2001, I had 74 RBIs, I think. And Christian Guzman had a great year in front of me. And I think I hit like 220 with men in scoring position. In 2002 and 2003, I was high 300s with men in scoring position. I had 64 and 65 RBIs, and Guzzi struggled with injuries and hit like 220 or 230. And people wanted to blame that I hit 15 homers in 01 and only hit 10 or 11 in 2002. And I'm like, I'm not driving in 11 runs with 4 more homers. So I felt like my numbers in 2003, they don't look as pretty, but I think it was my most consistent year where I didn't have the power numbers I had in 15, but like I felt like from day one to the end of the season, like I was as good as I could possibly be. I gave myself a chance to get hits every night. And I was injured that year too with a bad wrist. And I just felt like if I could have hit the way I hit in 2002 with my scoring position, like I did in 2001, I would have driven 100 and something. I would have driven 115 for sure. But it's funny. People always say, like, what was the difference? I said, well, in 2002, I actually hit the ball harder on average than I did in 01. Just everything I hit in 01 fell, and nothing I hit in 02. I'd go 3 for 4 in 2001, and the one time I make an out would be with men's scoring position. And then 2002, I'd go 1 for 4. And the one time I got a hit was with guys in scoring position. I'd rather have it that way than the other.
It's all circumstantial, and sometimes it's just out of your control. 2002, right in the middle of your greatness as a starter. First time the Twins make the postseason since that historic World Series in '91 against the Braves. You had a lot of great talent on that team, from pitching, Eddie Guardado. I think Johan Santana was on the team. And then, as position players, there was Torrey Hunter. There was a little-known guy named David Ortiz, who wasn't the superstar that he became with the Red Sox at the time. What clicked for the team that year? And you guys, I think, knocked out the Moneyball Athletics in the ALDS that year. So what clicked for you guys that year?
Correct. What it really was 2001. We started off, I want to say, like 18-3 or something, and we really took storm and got going. And I think without 2001, 2002 never happens. We just realized, I remember we got the All-Star break in 01 going, I think we had a 6-game lead or a 5-game lead on Cleveland. And I remember thinking to myself, like, we can't hold them off this long. I mean, they had Alomar and, Jim Thome, and they had Omar Vizquel and Kenny Lofton, and, like, we can't hold them off this long. And the next year was kind of the culmination of the contraction stuff, and they tried to get rid of us. And it was, the one thing my group had was we played with a chip on our shoulders because no one ever gave us credit. And you look back at that team now, and you're like, when we were a bunch of nobodies, and you're looking at that team now, and you're like, man, LaTroy Hawkins, sets records for most appearances in baseball as a reliever. Eddie Guardado saved 48 or 50 games one year. AJ was a two-time All-Star. Christian Guzman was a two-time All-Star. Corey Koski. Michael Kadire was our fourth outfielder, and he's a borderline Hall of Famer in my eyes. Torrey, David, David, and like people think like, well, what happened? Well, and that's my other thing I always say about David was people think like, wow, his 2003 year in Boston, he really came out. Well, he missed like 2 or 3 months with us in Minnesota in 2002. And when we opened up our huge lead in the division, that's when David came back healthy, and he only played a half that year. And he had like 21 homers and 70 RBIs. I'm going, if you multiply that by 2, there's your big poppy. There's your 41, 42 with 140. And we just enjoyed playing together. We enjoyed, Jock Jones had a hell of a year that year, leading off 27 homers. Brad Radke, Eric Milton, Joe Mays, we had some dudes, and we didn't take, and the funny thing is, Oakland, we'd never beaten Mulder, Hudson, and Zito. And
that's right. They were the big 3 back then for the A's.
They had a collective group of pitchers that we never beat, and it shows you our organizational strength. Terry Ryan had Paul Molitor scout him before the playoffs started, and Paul's like Yoda when it comes to baseball knowledge, and the way he broke them down. I think I was like 0 for 11 off Tim Hudson before Molly scouted him. After, I think I hit 400, and his stuff is still the same, but like the stuff that he told us and to look for, and it was magical, and it really, really helped us, and it gave us confidence to where we felt like we had a shot.
Right. Well, another big piece of that puzzle in 2002 was your new manager. He replaced the legendary manager. He, as in Ron Gardenhire, replaced the legendary manager of Tom Kelly, the 2 most decorated managers in Twins history. They're both members of the Twins Hall of Fame. You played for both. How do the 2 compare?
TK was a very strict, fundamental. He didn't like young players that hadn't proven themselves. He was tough. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. But he had a standard, and you had to play by that standard, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of us, it took us time to really understand that. I always said if TK would have stayed managing in the Twins, I would have played there a lot longer, just because if Tom Kelly had a lot more say, I think, than people understood. That's no knock against Gardy or Terry Ryan. I just think TK was adamant about defense, and he wanted to keep it. And but Gardy, I remember Gardy was our third base coach when TK was the manager, and how many times we'd all get to third base, and it was like a therapy session. And I'm like, this guy hates me, Gardy, and he's like, hang on, like, you're all right, so when we get Gardy, which we wanted, all the players wanted Gardy to get the job just because they felt like he put his time in. He was the right guy at the right time for us, and like I know when we had him, it was just we continued to work as hard as we always did, but we had a chance to like exhale, and we had fun doing it. And Gardy was fiery. We loved it. Like he'd go argue, get thrown out all the time, and for me, I loved it. I said and Tom Kelly would too, but like Gardy was just magical at that, and he let us play and let us be ourselves, and there's something to be said about that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so after 2003, well, in the middle, I should say, of the 2004 season, you leave the Twins, and you get traded. I think you get traded to the Boston Red Sox. Now, how difficult was it to leave the team that you made yourself a name with? Was it tough, or were you looking forward to play in a historic park, for the Red Sox who were in the middle of a pennant race? Was it something you were looking forward to?
It was heartbreaking because I remember I was injured. I was having some setbacks, some wrist surgery, and they put me on the DL. And I remember I flew myself to Baltimore. We were in Baltimore, and I still wasn't activated yet. And I remember walking down by the lineup card, and I saw my name in the lineup, and I wasn't even know I was activated yet. So I looked, and I was like, it was against Eric Bedard. Eric Bedard killed me, like every other lefty he pitched against. I remember seeing it going, and I went at Gardy, like, what's going on? He's like, well, we have to prove you're healthy because we're trying to move you. And hindsight's 2020. I appreciated it. I appreciate it now. Now thinking back, but the first time I went through that, I was heartbroken. I was like, why would you like? Why are you trying to trade me? Like I've had one bad half, and like, what do you mean? Like, like these are my guys. This is my club. This is my team. This is like, so I knew for a couple of weeks, and which kind of, every day was something new. I was going to Pittsburgh. I was going to Boston. I was going wherever, and it was really tough to play. I remember Torrey sitting me down. Everybody trying to get me to come on, man. This is us. And I go, I understand that, but why am I going to run through a burning building? When I know that they're going to get rid of me and that. And so, then I get traded, and it was a weird story. I remember we had a day game, like a 5 or 6 o'clock start in Minneapolis. 5 o'clock. It was a weird start time. We're not taking BP. We're in the cage, and the deadline came and went, and nothing. Right. And I'm like, oh gosh. So I'm talking to the media in Minneapolis. Like, we got to figure out a way to make me and Gardy work, because we weren't speaking to each other. It was really tense, and finally, in the middle of telling the media, like, I can make it work as long as he can. Like, we're both professionals. We'll fix it. And the coach tapped me on the shoulder and says, Gardy needs to see you. I'll never forget walking into his office, and Terry Ryan was sitting like in front of me, Gardy to my left, and Terry Ryan just unloading on both of us. Like, we were like two teenagers that got caught, stealing the car. Or like, it was just
principal's office.
Like, how dare you two put me in this position? I can't believe you two, after all the things we've been through, you both use, like, you handle this bad. And he let us both have it. More me than Gardy. And I remember he looked at me and he goes, we traded you to the Cubs. And I went, oh shit. Like, they had Derek Lee. And I'm like, I heard I was their AAA team. I was like, damn, I heard I was nice in August and September, because that's where I'm going, because Derek Lee's there. Derek Lee can flat out.
He had a great year the next year in 05.
I mean, he can flat out catch it. He's the Gold Glover, and he hits 30 home runs. I'm like, damn, I got no shot. And he goes, and then they traded you to the Red Sox. And I was like, okay. I got my stuff and walked behind where the washer and dryers were. I connected both clubhouses. I walked behind there and walked into that traveling mess that they call the Red Sox, which was awesome. But it was tough, because these guys are my family, and these guys I've known since 1995, and instructional leagues to spring trainings to whatever. We were always together, and we lived close to each other, and it was, you watch each other grow up for a decade. It's tough. It's tough to leave.
It becomes a family. I mean, in a sense, it's got to be tough. But I mean, I guess a lot of it was for the better, because you got to be a part of history. Did you guys think in a million years that you would come back from a 3-0 deficit against the Yankees in the ALCS that year? And what clicked for you guys? What was the catalyst in shifting the momentum in your favor that series?
I don't think we thought about winning the series. I just think, to a man on that team, we just felt like we need to play better. Like, we just didn't play well. And that was made. It wasn't the fact we were down 3-0. It was the fact that the way it looked and the way it felt. Because, I mean, people forget, like, we were down like 8-0 in game one. And David, or 7-0. David just missed it a 3-run homer that would have tied it in like the 8th. And we fought and clawed back. And, people forget that game. Yeah. And, I don't even remember. At game 2, I think John Lieber pitched a gem, and we lost maybe 4-2 or something. It was a close game, and then game 3 was just an abomination. And it's like, we just felt like we haven't played well. Like, this is not who we are. And I think for most of us, it was just like, and like, Kevin's, the whole thing about Kevin's thing about walking around going, don't let us win today. And I think that was kind of how everybody felt. It was like, you never know. And like, it was easy to say now. It was tough to believe. But if you think about it, and Terry Francona was a genius for this. He's like, just win today. And when you break it down that simply, because when you think about it, the Yankees haven't lost 4 games in a row in 2 years. So when you start thinking about it so far in advance, you're like, hang on a second. We got Pedro. We have Kurt Schilling. We have Derek Lowe. We have Bronson Arroyo. Like they can win one game.
You're still in this thing. Yeah.
Right. And then, Kevin's, at bat against Mo. And then Dave Roberts, stealing second base when everybody in the world knew he was running. Jorge threw a heck of a throw to second. I thought it was one of the best throws he's made in his career, release-wise and getting rid of it. And it's funny how baseball can change that fast. And I remember, we had Dave Steele's second. We have the right guy up who had great numbers against Mo. Billy Miller was the perfect guy to be up in the situation, based up the middle. And then I was behind Billy. I ended up bunting. So it's just like, it kind of like it was you just kept thinking, and people forget too that Tony Clark hit a ball. I want to say it was game 5. It was the next night that rolled. It was 2 outs, and it rolled on the top of the tiny little part of the fence at Fenway. And if that ball stays in the park, Miguel Cairo scores standing up.
Yeah.
And that ball rolled, and even in live time, that ball rolled on the wall, which seemed like for an eternity. Because like everybody in the home were like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it went over, and we're like, oh. I'm like, and I came in going, that's a sign. That's a sign. Like, we're like, this is, and so everything like that kept happening where you're like, okay. And then once we got to game 7, it was like, there was, and we had one other time, people forget too, that we have all momentum going into game 7. Boom. Johnny gets on, Manny gets a hit, and then Johnny gets thrown out at home on Manny's base at the left. And it was like, I look at Dave Roberts, I grabbed his forearm. I was like, please don't say that's the bubble that bursts. And then I was holding his forearm. So I squeezed it. So I looked and we kind of made eye contact. And then David took Kevin Brown deep like 2 pitches later. I was like, never mind, we're good. Like, and it was like,
you guys laid it on him that game. Everybody.
We thought it was all, you sit there and you think, was that Cinderella's slipper falling off?
Yeah.
And then boom, never mind, we have David. We're good. We're good.
I mean, Johnny Damon, Mark Bellhorn hit a home run that game. Everybody was here. I mean, it was you guys at that point. You knew you were going to the World Series. How euphoric was it? You made the last put out. How euphoric was it to end the 86-year drought? I mean, I would have been in a state of shock being responsible for that.
You think about, I remember it's hard not to. I'm thinking about playing first with 2 outs. I never really thought well, maybe I can make the last out. But you start thinking all the stuff that your parents sacrificed for you to do this.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about stuff like that. And for me being a first baseman, I'm thinking, I just got here and I watched what happened to those guys the year before in 03 when they got basically their heart ripped out of the chest at Yankee Stadium. And I'm just going, as a player on this team and as a fan of last year's team, it can't be any more fitting than this right here. And it almost you catch yourself going, oh my gosh, still focus on what's going on.
Yep.
And then the ball chopped it to Keith, and Keith snagged it, and I was like, oh shit, I got to cover first. Because your mind starts wandering.
Yeah, and remember, you're still playing, yeah.
But then you kind of snap out of it. But it was, you start thinking holy cow, it's over. This is and then it's pandemonium. But I was just happy mainly. To winning any World Series is huge and meaningful. And don't get me wrong, it changes people's lives. But to win that one the way we won it, to be a part of that group, to be down 3-0, never been done before. And almost to the point where the World Series was anticlimactic. I mean, it was actually if you were going to rank the series of that year with Anaheim, New York, and St. Louis, it was St. Louis series was third. It was really oh, this is after what we went through in New York with New York. So don't get me wrong, it was amazing experience. But like I said, I was just so happy for not only our guys that had Tim Wakefield got his heart ripped out the year before, and Doug Mirabelli, the guys that were there, Jason Varitek, and all those guys that kind of, like I said, they got tore up, and I felt bad for
guys. Nixon was another one. Yeah.
Todd Walker was on that team that didn't get a chance to come back. So there's it's no condolence, but it's and you start to realize the magnitude of what just happened. I know I did. I felt it. I basically come over as a defensive piece playing a position that one of the best first basemen of his generation, let alone his decade, played first, and made one, it wasn't, people that think that play was easy don't understand how quickly a ball can change on him. But it was in the back of my mind going you know what, and it's a shame that had to, but I was aware of how and why, and I was playing first base. I'm like, I am gonna dive on everything like it's a grenade. And like I'm not gonna take. I might take an at bat off. I am not taking one pitch off defensively.
Right. Right. The one thing I wished happened in that series is that you guys won at home. A little bit of magic, I feel like, gets taken away when you win at the visitors park.
I see that,
but it still was so awesome to see you guys finally break the.
I will say this though:
curse.
if there was one National League park to do it in St. Louis, the fans were like they were so like they're. I never put a Cardinal uniform on, but they are the best of the best fans. I mean, they cheer for their guys. They don't boo other people.
That's what I hear.
I mean, it's like there are like when I think baseball, like I think St. Louis Cardinals, like just because of the fan base, and like they're just, they were letting Red Sox fans come down, in their seats, and that it doesn't happen everywhere. It's just it always playing against them and playing, as a visitors there. I always enjoyed playing there. I thought, what a cool, if we couldn't do it at home, this is about as good as it gets for us. Yes,
there's a classiness to those fans, absolutely.
Correct.
So in terms, speaking of the National League, you go to the Mets the very next year, and it was kind of a new beginning for the Mets. Art Howe was out, Willie Randolph was in. It was David Wright's first full season.
Correct.
It was Jose Reyes' first full season. They signed you. They signed Carlos Beltran. They signed Pedro Martinez. Did you guys feel that 2005 for the Mets would be different with all those new pieces in place?
Well, I was traded. So I was traded there. Kind of late in the offseason. Willie coming over from the Yankees, his first time being a manager, with Jose and David Wright. I know, Willie pulled me aside and was like, I want you to take care of David. I want you to keep the media off of him. And like, I was like, sure, of course, I'll take care of them. No problem. And like within 2 weeks of spring training, I'm like, Willie, he doesn't need any help. Like he's got this. Like he's got that Jeter-esque quality to him where, he can smile and say something really rude and people just don't see it.
Right.
But he had, charisma. He was, American golden boy. And I said, this, being an American League guy, I didn't really know who he was. And getting a chance to play with him, I was like him and Jose. That team was Piazza, Tom Glavine. I know getting, Pedro there was huge for me. I was awful. Cliff Floyd had an amazing year. Mike Cameron was two of the most amazing teammates. Carlos Beltran. You could tell they were trying to make a push. And, I didn't work out there. It was awful. But, it was neat to be around those guys. And then the next year they made that run deep into October. But it was a very, I got to be around some, a lot of Hall of Famers and future ones. And I appreciated my time as hard as I was at the time. It was the second time being traded. And I still was hung up on trying to prove the Twins wrong for trading me in the first place. I put a lot of heat on myself. And I learned that year, I was like, I have to quit doing this. I have to quit trying to prove people wrong and just play.
And prove it to yourself. You have nobody else to prove it to. That's it.
Right, just it.
Yeah. So after the Twins, I mean, you're on a new team every year after the Twins, essentially. Mm-hmm. Depending on the player's personal situation, whether they have family, kids, whatever, that could be tough to have to uproot that often. And through the end of your career, in 2009, you kept having to relocate to play for different teams. How difficult is that?
I didn't think it was too difficult, just because it was, I had some familiarity to it. I mean, like Joe Torre was my manager in 07 with the Yankees. He pretty much brought me to the LA in 09. So that helped. The city didn't really bother me. The city doesn't faze me. It let me see the world. I always said, like, the hard part as a player, of course you want to keep going back to the same place. But I always said the same thing that was kind of hard for me as a player really helped me being a coach and a manager, because I got a chance to see other players, see how other organizations do things. To just, every time you learn to be a better teammate, and you learn to be a better person, and you learn to keep, being a better, just all around people person, to where you can mesh and baseball players are baseball players. Guys in the big leagues are so humble, and they crack jokes themselves because of all the failure you're around. And I really enjoyed I had different moments. I was the young guy, in Minnesota, and then I end up, being the veteran guy that LA with, Andre Ethier and Matt Kemp and James Loney and so it's David Wright, Jose Reyes. Like I was in between. I wasn't really an old guy. I wasn't a new guy, but I was like, hey, I still have a career to figure out too. So having a chance to play with those young guys and some of the older guys, I always say I was in the right place at the right time. A lot of times, I was fortunate enough to bounce around and play with some really amazing teammates.
That's a good way to look at it. So life since the big leagues, what have you been up to over the last 15 or so years? I know you're big into fishing, but what talk to me about it.
I started, I remember Don Mattingly, as a matter of fact, I was in 2010. I tried to come back. I blew my shoulder up sliding at second base in LA. And basically I came back and I knew Joe, I just didn't have my shoulder. I couldn't hold up. And I said, you know what, that's enough. And Donnie kind of mentioned to me about becoming a hitting coach. And because we would sit down and as an older player, and I was now the bench guy, kind of the pinch hitter off the bench. And we would sit there and talk countless about, film and someone else's swing and da-da-da. And he's like, you'd be a really good hitting coach. And I said, well, thank you. But I'm not done yet. So when I got done, I remember I was done for like 2011. So he was now managing the Dodgers.
Right. And
the Marlins, they were playing the Marlins. And I went to go see him because Donnie and I had a pretty good relationship and still do to this day. I'm very grateful for that. I came down to the field, saw him before the game, and he goes, I'm not going to ask you again to coach. And I was like, okay. So I went to instructional league with the Dodgers that November and became a hitting coach with the Dodgers. And I had Jock Peterson, Corey Seager, some more of dudes that could flat out play. And then I just decided, I was like, you know what? I ended up getting a chance to manage with the Twins and I did that for 5 years with the Twins, and was fortunate enough to play with and manage Buxton's to Max Kepler, Jorge Polanco, Barrios. The list goes on. And I was lucky to win 2 championships with those guys. And then Gardy became the manager of the Detroit Tigers, and I got let go by the Twins because they brought in a new GM, which I understand. And then Gardy brought me over and managed AAA for 2 years with the Tigers. And 2019 was my last year. And now I decided, I was like, I haven't seen my son play. Yeah. Like I was like, and he was 15, about 15 years old, 14 years old. I was like, you know what? I've given up so much. I want to be able to watch my son play high school ball. And that being said, I got cornered into coaching his high school team. So here I am coaching his high school. Between coaching his high school, I do dabble in some EAS recruiting, helping kids get to school, softball, baseball, which is it's a really cool thing to see these kids get a chance to go play somewhere. So I don't really have a steady job, but I'm awful busy for someone who does not have a full-time job. How's that?
That's great, though. It keeps it interesting.
Keep moving. And I'm looking forward. I'm thinking I'm going to go back to school and finish my degree here probably soon. And I would love to become a head coach at a college. I think that's once my son graduates high school, and depending on how his career ends up, by the time that comes up, I'm hoping to get my degree. That way I can at least throw my name in the hat for some of these college openings.
Awesome. And nothing but the best. And I think you'd be great at it. So let's talk a little bit about the game has changed a lot since you played, and especially in the Manfred era, but really over the last 10 years or so, maybe since 2012, you really saw a lot of changes. This year was in my opinion ridiculous with the pitch clock. I mean, so much is just so different than it used to be. What is your take on all these changes? Do you think they're good for the game? Can you not stand them? What's your viewpoint?
A little bit of both. I mean, there's times when, don't get me wrong, like the pitch clock. Yeah, I get it. I as a manager, I didn't want to manage through long games. Like it drove me crazy because it was so slow. But anybody who thinks the game is slow has never had the pencil in their hat having to make moves. For a game that's slow paced, there's a lot that goes on that if you're not on top of it, it's too late. So the pitch clock thing, they dabbled with it in the minor leagues. Didn't mind it. Interesting to see how it works in October when pitches mean a little bit more. To me, October baseball should be left alone.
Yeah.
Once the regular season's over with, all bets are off. We're going back to, I get the 5. We were minor leagues. We had the 5 mound visits from the catcher. I thought that was it just keeps you from going out to nauseam. So it's like you have to learn, retain some information.
Right.
We'll see. Everybody wants the game faster. I'm more concerned about, the way we're doing it. And I think it's –
I agree.
fundamentally, we're not as good as we used to be. And that's the kids don't practice anymore. They just play games, travel ball and all that stuff. And they don't practice. And I do coach the 18U. I'm a part of the staff of the 18U national team with USA Baseball. And I was lucky enough to do it last year, and I'm doing it again this year. These are, come 2 weeks from now, the kids that I was fortunate enough to be around last year, there's going to be some guys making $7-8 million.
Yeah.
That didn't know how to take a lead from first base. Who did not know how to take a lead. And, and I get it on both ends. I don't want to come across as that guy that, back when I played, but there are some
but
things.
The standard has gone down.
And it's not, and I always say this, it's not the player's fault. It's
right.
The industry. The industry has allowed them to make mistakes and not care about putting the ball in play. And they don't care about strikeouts. And, if it's not the player's fault, they're getting told what the industry, what they want to pay for. Mm-hmm. And they're giving it to them. So I just feel like the pitchers adjusted to the hitters and the hitters haven't adjusted back. You can talk about velo all day long.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that, yes, on average, yes, the velo is up, but seeing and managing in AAA with guys that were called up from AAA to the big leagues and how magically their fastball was 6 or 7 miles an hour harder in the big leagues than what it was on average in AAA, the guns are reading different. And the old ray gun, I played with Paul Wilson, and Paul Wilson was the first pick of the 1994 draft.
Yep.
And he hit 92. He hit 92 on the ray gun. And his last pitch in Omaha that year was 98 miles an hour. So I know exactly what 100 looks like back before, before he got really injured. But it was a billion miles an hour. And I go, firm is firm. And I always say this. It's not the velo that is hard on hitters. It's the other stuff. And that's where I think the guys have gotten better. And the lack of command too. They're on the rush to get guys up. And, there's a lot smarter people than I am dealing with this every day, but I know how been in 3 organizations and listening to them from their analytic department going, it makes sense, but until like $1 million question from a AAA manager, is he ready? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know he's mastered this level. Like, there's only one other level for him to go.
Yeah.
But for me to sit here and speak for someone that's not me, I don't know what his heart rate's going to be when he gets to the third deck and his first at bats at Yankee Stadium.
You only know if you're ready once you get there, really.
All I can tell you is he's mastered this one, and he's ready. Is he ready? We'll find out, and we'll see. So, but I've never seen an analytic number or piece of paper fix someone's swing. You actually have to be able to fix it and I always say this, analytics tell people who can't see it with their own eyes. Baseball people can see it with their own eyes. I don't need a piece of paper or a number to spit out that I know he gets a lot of ground balls. Or, his fastball has a huge spin rate. I'm like, well, I always say this about pitching. If you just watch the hitter's reaction, he'll tell you everything you need to know about the pitcher's fastball. And there's some good stuff in there too. There's amazing stuff. You can dig as far as you want to. And I'm glad I'm not playing in this just because they would try to spit all this information at me, and I'd be like, I had a hard time watching the video. And I was like, it's too much, la 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 la. I get super mechanical when I overanalyze it. Yes, I want to see it. Yes, I want to see a couple, but I don't want to sit here and just dissect it all the time because I'm going to lose my mind. So, but like I said, some of it's good. And there's a happy medium somewhere, and hopefully we find some balance here coming up pretty soon.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do you think that with all these there's a bad taste in a lot of the serious fans' mouths? And do you think this Rob Manfred stigma is here to stay for a little while? Do you think there's any getting over it in the years to come? Kind of like the '94 strike. People hated baseball after that happened, and it took the whole steroid era to erase it. Is there anything that's going to erase this, or is it a matter of time before it all kind of goes away and we just adjust, or is the stigma here to stay, do you think?
I mean, I appreciate the fact he's trying to make the game better, but sometimes it's fine the way it is. And I think we're trying to bring in a fan base who doesn't love the game, but we're losing the majority of why people watch the game. And that's, I always feel like no matter what it is, your passion is I'd rather have 10 passionate fans than 100 who are going to leave in the fifth inning. If that's right. the scale we're dealing with. And I get it. The new generation, they always talk about, they always want everything now and they want to fix everything. But I'm like, hang on a second. I always feel like the more players, ex-players we can get into front offices and general manager positions, and the more of those guys will start to swing this another direction. A little bit. We're starting to see a couple of them here and there. That being said, you have a woman in Kim Ang who I think the absolute world of. I think she should be, for what she's doing this year, to me, she's executive of the year already. I was fortunate enough to work under her in LA, and I think she's long overdue and getting a GM job. She's phenomenal.
Brilliant woman.
She gets it. And there's more of them. I don't care, man, woman, whatever. I just feel like the great ones listen to both sides. They don't and baseball's becoming experience is killing you. There's a lot of ex-players that are getting booted out of coaching because the people that are in the front office aren't thick-skinned enough to be told that, that doesn't work though, or that might not have a trouble with. And I feel like it's the only job in America right now that experience is killing people. I always say this. I always say, if your son or daughter's hurt, if they're sick, you don't take them to a veterinarian. You don't take them to a car wash. You take them to a doctor. Mm-hmm. And if your parents or someone you love needed open heart surgery, do you want someone performing the heart surgery that's done heart surgery before, or someone who watched it on YouTube, or someone who actually looked it up and just read about it? I want personal experience. And that's the one thing I always felt like as a player, what meant more to me than mechanics was being able to talk to some older players, ex-players, whatever it is, that had experience of knowing what I feel like when I'm standing down a bullet at 60 feet, 6 inches, what to look for, like signs, whatever it is. Like I know I'm not alone, and the experience matters. And I think, a lot of these kids don't know it because they don't. And like the thing is, they don't have an answer because they've never been there. And there's a way for both of us to work in existence. And I think, I know Detroit, I was let go because all the guys at big league service time got fired because they called us union guys. I'm like, well, we know what it feels like. You don't. No disrespect, but like, I've never done your job, but you've never. LaTroy Hawkins always said it best. He said it to the media all the time. He always said, I can do your job. You can't do mine. So don't ever forget that. Yeah. And that's the way I felt about some front office people. Not all of them. Majority of them are always respectful, and we're working together at this. And that's where passion kicks in. But I was like, I can do what you do. You can't do what I do. Right. So like I'm not saying your way's right, my way's wrong, or my way's right. So it's like we need to be on the same page with this, and we'll fix it. And it's because nobody ever wants anything broken. We want to fix everything. And that's the one thing about being a coach, no matter what it is, which is why I love coaching so much, is because it's easy to be a player in the sense of you only have you to fix. Yeah. When you have, as soon as you fix player A, player B's falling off, and you got to go work to that. I always said I was lucky enough to play as long as I have, but I was born to coach, and I was born to manage, and I was born to help other players. It's a part of the game that I love turning over to the next guy.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question in terms of on-field experience. A lot of guys, sabermetrics is huge nowadays, and it's stuff that's kind of come up by or not players, but people who have never played the game. Do you think that like WAR is a true testament to how good a player is, or do you have to have the on-field experience to know how good a player was?
I mean, like I said, there's you don't have to play to be knowledgeable about
Right.
what makes a winning club, but like there's times when like I've never like Bill Jennings, I've never seen anybody quantify what a chemistry percentage like that matters.
Yeah,
it matters.
it
And
does.
like you can have the highest WAR in the league, and if you're an ass and no one wants to play around you,
right,
you're not helping us. So
right.
there's definitely there's a chemistry mix. There's a personality trait that you're looking for and it's at every level. They can't find it.
They can't account for that. There's no way to account for that. And you look at the teams of like the Indians of the mid '90s or the Yankees of the mid 2000s. Those were all-star teams on paper. They never won a World Series.
Correct.
So it's not a true testament. You have to factor chemistry in somehow, and sabermetrics doesn't do that.
We do a lot of that in our EIS recruiting. It's like we always end it with hashtag CHP. Like, can he play, or can she play? Like, just because you're not a perfect game 10.0, that doesn't mean you can't play. I've seen a lot of 9.5 and 10.0s that can't get anybody out or get a hit at the D1 level.
Right.
I witnessed it a ton. And it's no disrespect to PG, because they do a fantastic job of going and doing the data and doing all this stuff and getting these kids, all the exposure they need. And that's not it. And the point is, it's not the PG number. It's just there are some kids that maybe aren't like, they don't measure really well. They don't have a huge exit velocity. They don't throw hard, but damn, they get people out and they find a way to get hits. And those guys usually are the ones that help you win the most games. And that's, like I always say, wedge breakers on the kickoff team. No one wants to be one, but everybody needs one. Yeah. And that everybody needs them. And that's, that's the one thing that you can't put. You said it perfectly. The mid 2000 Yankee teams was like 04. You look around, it's like, goodness gracious. Sheffield, Giambi, Jeter, Posada, Bernie. It's like the list goes on. That Matsu, you're like, goodness gracious. But you look at the teams that won. Knobloch, all-star. But Paul O'Neill had snarl. Like Bernie wore you out. It just
the intangibles that can't be quantified through any numbers.
Shane Spencer, like those guys, they're even their like side parts were phenomenal players. And they just knew their role. They kept going, and it was like a well-oiled machine. And that's some of the things that I think gets the Astros. Everybody wants to bash on them about banging garbage cans, but damn, they will wear you down offensively. They take what the game gives you. And they can hit it over the fence, and they can hit the ball on the ground the other way for a base hit. And they have pitching. They wear you out. That's why they're not the best analytic team in the history of the world on their they don't have the best player in every position. But damn, you put all 9 of them together, they will wear you out.
Yeah, they will. Any favorite teams or players to watch this year? Any teams or players that have surprised you and you think will go far into the playoffs?
I tend to follow the kids that I've had a chance to coach or manage.
Oh, that's great.
Arias almost started with 400. Buxton, Kepler, all the guys that I've actually had, Polanco, all the guys that I've had a chance to, Eddie Rosario, the list goes on and on. All the guys I've had a chance to work for and help, and whether they're in the big leagues or not.
You're rooting them on now.
Nico Goodrum played a couple of years in the Tigers. Now he's in AAA with the Red Sox, but I get video from his dad like twice a week, and we dissect them together, and I love it. And it's just like they're like my, like, I won't say my kids because they're not that much younger than me, but like we're like brothers. And I just I watch what Corey does. I watch anybody that I have a chance to flip in the cage. Like I want them to see all do well. Mitch Garver. The names go. I always I don't follow really any team anymore. I just follow like my kids.
My
kids, and I want to make sure that whether it's a text here and there, Buxton will send me one every once in a while, like "Love you, fresh," or just stuff like that. Let you know that like, hey, what you did and how you did it meant something to them at some point in their life, because that's the one great thing about coaching at the pro ball level. And I had an A ball, and I kind of went up this ladder with them. was I had them at an influential age where like they're becoming men and they're still trying to figure stuff out. Yeah. And now you see them, they got wives, they've got kids, and you're like, now you're a dad.
You help shape it.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not here to make you better. I'm here to I just want to watch you become a better man. And then that's the baseball will come second. And we just, I'm grateful for the guys. I was fortunate enough to coach a lot of really, really, really phenomenal young men. And that's who I follow. It's like I never left. And I always make sure that, I make sure I keep up on what they're doing.
That's so awesome to have a part in their lives and to watch it come to fruition like that. So that's all I got, man. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do it. Have a happy Father's Day, a good weekend, and we will stay in touch, my friend.
Perfect.
All right, Doug. Mike. Thanks so much, pal. You take care. Bye-bye.